Hello, my beautiful friends. My name is Kim, and I hope you are having a fabulous day today. If you are interested in true crime like I am, I hope that you would consider hitting that subscribe button. But either way, thanks for being here. Today's case is heartbreaking and horrific, with a capital H, to say the least. Chris Newsom and Channon Christian were boyfriend and girlfriend and were embracing in the parking lot of an apartment when out of nowhere, the worst nightmare occurred. Let's talk about Chris and Channon. The two innocent victims in this horrific case are Channon Christian and Chris Newsom. Channon was a good student, got good grades, was a beautiful girl, and her mom would say even though she was beautiful, she was not stuck on herself. Very humble. She was a student at University of Tennessee and had a very promising future. Chris was described as a very good kid, an excellent baseball player, but had an injury, so he wasn't able to continue with baseball. He was said to be a very hard worker, worked as a trim carpenter. He had a beautiful smile and was a friend with everybody he met. Not that it would make a real difference, but Chris was not a troublemaker. Neither was Channon. They both kept their noses clean. They were both just starting their adulthood. Chris and Channon started dating in November of 2006, a very fresh relationship. On Saturday, January 6, 2007, Channon and Chris planned to go out for dinner together and attend a friend's party. During that afternoon, Channon went to a friend's apartment to get all dolled up for the party. At around 8 p.m., Shannon's friend, whose apartment she was at, decided that she was just going to go ahead to the party. Channon stayed behind because she wanted to wait for her boyfriend Chris to pick her up, and they were going to have dinner first, and then they were going to go to the party. Chris arrived, and he and Channon went out to the apartment complex's parking lot. Channon and Chris were standing close in Channon's car, hugging each other. 3 men saw the couple and described that they were going to carjack them. But when they seen headlights coming from another car, it spooked them. So they decided, instead of just carjacking them, that they would push them inside the car. Both were forced to get in the back seat of Channon's SUV at gunpoint. They then tied their hands behind their backs, and they were taken to one of the criminals' house, and his last name was Davison, and they lived on Chipman Street where they went. Both Channon and Chris were raped. Chris is believed to have been raped inside of Davison's house. According to testimony of the Knox County acting medical examiner, Chris was sodomized with an object and raped by a minimum of one of the perpetrators. He was then taken to a set of railroad tracks where he was forced to walk barefoot to the location where he was murdered. Prosecutors believe a mangled dog leash found on the hillside leading up to the railroad tracks was used to force Chris to walk, ultimately to his death. When Chris was murdered, his hands were bound behind his back and his feet were bound together. He was blindfolded with a bandana and gagged with a sock. He wore only a shirt, t-shirt, and underwear. Chris was shot in his neck and in his back. But Chris was still very much alive after these 2 shots, and after a while, they shot him in the back of his head. The fatal shot was fired with the muzzle of the gun against his head above his right ear, and it severed his brainstem. But they weren't done. After that, after killing Chris, they set his body on fire. Meanwhile, Channon is held prisoner inside of Davison's house for approximately 36 hours. She was mostly in this north bedroom. That was 36 hours of pure evil hell. Prosecutors believe that one of the suspects named Coleman, this girl This girl held Channon captive while the male offenders were murdering Chris. So it was only Coleman and Channon in the house. Coleman did nothing. All of these people involved are awful, but this girl, she is the worst in my eyes. I'll explain later in the case why I feel that way. After murder, because they were all bad, okay? So they're all bad, but I have an explanation for her. But after murdering Chris, the men returned to Davison's house where they beat and repeatedly raped Channon. The medical examiner testified that Channon died after hours of sexual torture, sustaining severe head trauma and suffering severe injuries to her vagina, anus, and mouth due to the sexual assaults. Her injuries were consistent with being raped with an object. According to the medical examiner, the sexual attack Channon endured was extreme and much more than a simple sexual assault. Prosecutors believe that Channon was tied up to a chair and orally raped by Davison and Cobbins. Here is Cobbins' testimony.
While they're gone, the girl is still in my brother's room. Vanessa's she's telling me her stomach is hurting. So she gets up and goes to the bathroom. I tell her that I'm finna go and check on the girl. As I go and check on the girl, ask her, is she okay? She asked me, could she get some water? I brought her some water out of the refrigerator. When I went into the room, she's laying on the air mattress with her hands bound over her head. She's laying on her back. Her hands are tied, still tied like this, and tied to a duffel bag full of free weights and books and stuff. Same thing with her feet. Her ankles are tied, and it's tied to a duffel bag. It's tied to a duffel bag with weights and books in it. So I untied her hands. Well, I didn't untie her hands. I untied the string that was going to the duffel bag. I untied it so she could sit up and drink the water. I gave her the water. She drank the water like that. She asked me what's going on. I said, I don't know. She asked me where her boyfriend is. I said, I don't know. She asked me could she smoke a cigarette. Her cigarettes and her purse were sitting on the bookshelf behind me. I could see a pack of red and white Marlboros on the book stand. I said, I don't see why not. I took a cigarette out, lit it for her, and gave it to her. She asked me, why were we doing this? I told her, it's not me. It's not me. It's not me. I don't have anything to do with this. Matter of fact, we're being held here against our will just like you are. The only difference is that you're tied up and we're not. So she started asking me, would I convince him to let her go? I said, I'll try. She said, just please, just please. She said, please, can you just convince him to let me go? I said, I'll try. And she said, I'll do anything. Just please, just let me go. And she even offered oral sex. So, and I had her give me oral sex. She gave me oral sex. As I started to ejaculate, I heard a noise outside, and I heard Vanessa flushing the toilet. So I got spooked. I jumped up, fixed my clothes. As I ejaculated, it got on her shirt and some on her pants. I fixed myself. I fixed my clothes. I put her back like I found her, and went back into the living room and sat down. Vanessa came out of the bathroom. We sat there on the floor, just sat there looking stupid.
He sounds almost convincing. Well, that monster damaged the membrane in her throat when he forced her to give him oral sex. He sounded like it was consensual. Burn in hell. It was not consensual. If that wasn't bad enough, Channon was also anally and vaginally raped. She was also beaten and kicked in her vagina and beaten on her head. Channon suffered extreme hemorrhaging to both her head and her vaginal area. Additionally, Channon suffered bruises and carpet burns on most of her body. According to Davidson's confession, during Channon's captivity, she said over and over again she just didn't want to die. Her poor family, I think about them sitting in that courtroom having to hear all the devastation that happened to their baby. It honestly makes me sick. Before killing her in efforts, thinking they're the criminal masterminds to get rid of DNA, they poured bleach down her throat and throughout her body. They poured bleach, scrubbing her body, including her bleeding and battered genital area. Channon was bound with curtains and straps of bedding. Her face was tightly covered with a small trash bag, and it was tied in the back, and her body was stashed in 5 large trash bags. Channon, who was naked except for her camisole and her sweater, she was tied in a fetal position and placed inside of a garbage can and covered with sheets. The medical examiner testified at the trial that there was evidence that Channon slowly suffocated to death. It would have taken between 10 to 30 minutes. Channon died between the afternoon of the 7th and the afternoon of the 8th. As Channon was suffocating to death, Davidson left to spend time with his on and off again girlfriend and gave his ex-girlfriend, or on and off again girlfriend, Channon's personal items. Davidson also used Chris's cell phone and was seen wearing Chris's shoes. Zero remorse. After Channon and Chris did not show up at the party, the couple's friends began calling and texting them to see where they were. They didn't show up, and it wasn't like them to not respond. So later at around 11 p.m., 2 of Chris's friends went to the apartment from where the couple had been kidnapped and found that Chris's truck was in the parking lot, but Channon's SUV was nowhere to be seen. A witness who worked as a driver for Waste Connections arrived at work on Chipman Street around 12:30 a.m. on January 7th. He noticed that the lights in the Chipman house, which was Davidson's house, were on, and that the house seemed busy for that time of night. He saw a 4Runner, Channon's car, in front of the house, and the porch lights were on. The witness later observed that the 4Runner drove slowly by him. The car slowed down for about 20 seconds as if the occupants were checking him out. The waste management or the waste connections guy saw 4 black men in the car. Another witness who lived around one block away from the Chipman home heard 3 pops from the direction of the train tracks, and that was at approximately 1:45 a.m. Chris's body was discovered near a set of nearby railroad tracks on January 7th at 12:20 in the afternoon, so 12 hours or somewhere around there after his death. He was found by some railroad employees. Though there was semen inside of Chris's body, DNA in the semen had been destroyed by the fire that they had set on him. A comforter was wrapped around Chris's body, and a sweatshirt was wrapped around his head. His bare and muddy feet indicated that he had made this walk barefooted. On January 7th, Channon failed to answer calls from her mother and her friends. Channon was known not to ever miss work, So when she didn't show up, they called the family. Her work called her family to check on her. The couple's friends and families tried to find them, checking local hospitals and filing a missing persons report. Shannon's parents requested help from law enforcement, but were told they would have to search themselves. I'm hoping a reminder that their tax dollars pays their salaries was given. Nevertheless, they then sought help from Shannon's mobile provider and learned that her phone had last pinged at Cherry Street phone tower. Channon and Chris's family and friends searched the Cherry Street area and found Shannon's abandoned Toyota 4Runner between 1:30 a.m. and 2 a.m. on Monday, the 7th evening into the 8th at 1:30 a.m. to 2 a.m. Several items were missing from Shannon's vehicle, including a teddy bear and photographs Shannon kept in her car, as well as her phone charger and iPod. The front seats were pushed all the way back, where Shannon could not have reached the pedals to even drive. The floor mats of her car were covered with mud, which was inconsistent of how Shannon maintained her vehicle. Stickers Shannon kept on the outside windows had been removed. Inside the vehicle was a pack of Newport cigarettes, even though neither Shannon or Chris smoked that brand. Police also recovered an envelope from the vehicle that gave a fingerprint leading them to LaMarcus Davison with an address that was only 2 blocks away from where Shannon's abandoned car was found. When police went to Davison's home on Tuesday, January 9th, they found the house unoccupied and Shannon's body in a trash can in the kitchen. Threw her away like garbage. Shannon's body was stashed in 5 large garbage bags. The bags had Davison's prints on them. Davison's prints were also found on the box of the garbage bags as well. Davison's sperm was found in Shannon's vagina and anus, while Cobbin's sperm was found in her mouth. Also inside the house were several items that belonged to Shannon's and Chris, including Shannon's purse, clothing she had in her vehicle, Shannon's shoes, her camera, photographs. These photographs were ripped and burned. I don't know why they did that to just those items, but they did. And they found an iPod that belonged to Shannon and Chris's baseball caps and driver's license. They found more than one baseball cap that belonged to Chris. Several of the victims' belongings had Davison's prints on them. The items from Shannon's SUV were shoved into trash bags. In addition to the sperm found on Shannon's body, Davison's sperm was found on Shannon's jeans, while Cobbin's sperm was found on her camisole sweater and jeans. Shell casings were found at the Davisons' home that matched the bullets used to kill Chris. After finding Shannon's body and discovered the presence of Davison's semen on her clothing and her privates, police were on a manhunt for Davison. After learning of a phone call between Davison and Boyd, they asked Boyd for information regarding Davison's whereabouts. Boyd directed them to a vacant house, and so on January 11th, Davison was arrested at that vacant house. There, the police found Chris's size 9.5 Nike tennis shoes and a .22 caliber high standard revolver. Davison was then interrogated about the murders. He told five different stories, first claiming that he had left the house on Friday and knew nothing about the crimes. He later told the police that Cobbins and Thomas arrived at his house at around 10 p.m. on Friday and informed him that they had carjacked some people who were in the vehicle. Davison claimed he saw the victims tied up in the back seat and did not want to be any part of it, and so he left to go smoke marijuana. He said he returned to the house about 20 minutes later to find Shannon, who told him she didn't want to die. He then used Shannon's vehicle to deal drugs and then wiped it clean. Davison claimed that he did not go past the living room and that he never raped Shannon. Clearly, all his stories were lies. The police saw right through it. They had so much DNA. On January 11th, Thomas, Cobbins, and Coleman were arrested in Lebanon, Kentucky. Police seized a computer in which Thomas and Cobbins had been viewing news coverage about the murders. Police also seized a purse that contained several of Shannon's belongings, including her cosmetic bag and a change purse. Additionally, police found Shannon's overnight bag. Cobbins gave a statement to the investigators claiming that he, Davison, and Boyd drove to an apartment complex for someone to meet a girl. When they arrived, they saw the SUV with the female in the driver's seat. She was speaking to a male, which then Davison and Boyd basically carjacked them and ordered Cobbins to drive back to Davison's house, the Chipman Street home. According to Cobbins, once they arrived at the residence, Davison took the woman into the bedroom, took Channon into the bedroom, and Boyd drove away with the man. Boyd then later returned without the male victim. Cobbins denied having any sexual intercourse with the female victim. Coleman admitted to having been present in the house during the crimes, claiming that he had been held hostage by the other defendants. This is the part where I talk about Coleman. A journal was recovered after the arrest of Coleman. An entry from January 9th read, "Last night was one of a kind. We stayed with a crackhead that is cool as hell. It snowed a little bit, but it's already melted. Let's talk about adventures. I had an hell of an adventure," and she put it in capitals, hell of an adventure in all caps, "since I've been in the big TN, Tennessee. It's a crazy world these days, but I love the fun, adventures, and lessons that I've learned. It's going to be a long, interesting year. How is killing and raping 2 people an adventure to her? Bungee jumping is an adventure. Murdering and raping is not an adventure. Carjacking, staying with a crackhead, not adventures." Her mugshot of her smiling, gross. A forensic document examiner testified that the handwriting in the entry matched Coleman's handwriting. Prosecutors George Giovanni Detroit Thomas, Detroit is his nickname, Thomas, born January 23, 1983, faced a total of 46 charges. Thomas was indicted on 16 counts of felony murder related to the rape, robbery, and kidnapping committed against Shannon and Chris, 2 counts of premeditated murder, 2 counts of especially aggravated robbery, 4 counts of especially aggravated kidnapping, 20 counts of aggravated rape, and 2 counts of theft. Levani Darnell Rome Cobbins, born December 20th, 1982, faced the same charges, almost identical to Thomas. He was also charged with assaulting a correctional officer while incarcerated pending trial. In 2003, Cobbins had been convicted of third-degree attempted robbery in New York. He and Davison are half-brothers. LaMarcus Duvall Slim Davison, born June 13th, 1981, faced the same 46 charges as Thomas. Davison was originally from Memphis and had just in August 2006 completed a 5-year sentence in Tennessee on a previous felony conviction for carjacking and aggravated robbery. Davison was also indicted for a second robbery, which was committed at a Pizza Hut one day after the murders. Vanessa Lynne Coleman, born June 29, 1988, was arrested by Lebanon Police Department in her hometown of Lebanon, Kentucky. She faced 40 Tennessee state charges. Coleman was indicted on 12 counts of felony murder related to rape, robbery, kidnapping, and theft. 1 count of premeditated murder of Shannon only, 1 count of especially aggravated robbery of Chris only, 4 counts of especially aggravated kidnapping, 20 counts of aggravated rape, and 2 counts of theft. Eric Dwayne, nickname E. Boyd, born February 18, 1972, was arrested in connection with the fatal carjacking. He was not indicted by the Knox County grand jury in 2007, but was indicted by a federal grand jury in the Eastern District of Tennessee on August 23, 2007. The grand jury returned a superseding indictment charging him with being an accessory to a carjacking, resulting in serious bodily injury to another person. Later, Boyd was accused by Thomas and Cobbins of the rape and murder of Chris, and a search warrant was obtained for his DNA. He was tried on state charges more than a decade later in 2019. So not that long ago. Judge Richard Baumgardner allowed Thomas and Cobbins to be tried by juries from Davidson's County, which includes Nashville. District Attorney Randy Nichols would announce that the state would seek the death penalty for both Cobbins, the first to go to trial, and Coleman if convicted. They both would have deserved it, but it didn't happen. Davidson was also indicted for a second robbery, which was committed after the murders. Davidson's attorney asked if he could get a change in venue because of all the publicity, but it was denied. With all the DNA evidence, past convictions, fingerprints, they could have changed it to the moon, but that still would have not made a difference whether or not they found him guilty, in my opinion. So they went to trial, they were all charged, but what happened next, you will not believe. Appeals and retrials. All of the 5 people involved appealed their convictions. The sentencing judge, Richard Baumgardner, one of Knoxville's 3 criminal court judges, was forced to resign from the bench in March of 2011, having admitted to drug addiction and purchasing prescription pain medication from convicts. He was accused by a woman of trading legal favors for sex during breaks in the court sessions. What is going on? He pled guilty to official misconduct. It was held that his ability to conduct trials had been impaired during the prior 2 years on the bench, and he was disbarred in September. Judge John Curry Blackwood granted new trials to all 4 state defendants after the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation showed the first judge was likely impaired while presiding over their trials. Blackwood set retrials for between June and November 2012 pending appeals and set bail at $1 million for Coleman, the only defendant whose sentence had the possibility of parole. He denied a change in venue but allowed for jurors to be brought in from outside of Knox County. Due to double jeopardy of the defendants, they faced a maximum of the sentence that they had already received, and thus only Davidson was eligible for capital punishment. In June of 2012, Judge Blackwood again granted new trials for Davidson, Cobbins, and Thomas. Basing his decision on the 13th juror rule, prosecutors filed to have Judge Blackburn recused from the case, citing Blackburn's emotional involvement. His ex parte communication with the defense lacked of candor with a local media. Following Blackwood's recusal, Senior Judge Watts Kurtz was named to oversee the retrials and the decision to grant them. Retrials were denied for Cobbins and Davidson and granted for Thomas and Coleman. I know this is confusing and maybe it's not important to you guys, but it was a mess. Just judge after judge, and this poor family this whole time has to hear these updates and news and retrials. I just, again, feel so bad for that family that had to go through this. Verdicts from the retrials facing the same charges as in her first trial for Coleman. On November 20th, 2012, Vanessa Coleman was convicted by a jury. These convictions were on lesser charges than her initial convictions. Coleman was sentenced to 35 years in prison on February 1st, 2013, minus the credit for time already served, which in my opinion isn't long enough, but there has been some rumors that Coleman was involved in the object that Channon endured. I don't know if that is indeed true, but that was what was going around, which is disgusting. During sentencing, Blackwood commented that the psychological torture of the unfortunate victim was immense. He also called the crime the most horrible murder case he's ever seen. And I bet you it's the most horrible he'll ever see. This case is by far one of the most awful cases that I've covered. In 2014, the Supreme Court of Criminal Appeals denied Coleman's request for a new trial and upheld her sentence. Judge Thomas T. Woodall wrote in his opinion, the facts at the trial showed that Coleman was in the Chipman Street home for nearly 2 days with Channon, where she was confined and brutally raped before she was tied up, wrapped in 5 plastic trash bags, and stuffed into a garbage can. In the journal entries written after the slaying, Coleman described one hell of an adventure in the Big Tennessee and wrote that she loved her life. This evidence supports the trial court's finding that Coleman is a dangerous offender, and I would have to agree. On May 17, 2013, the retrial for George Thomas ended in a verdict of guilty on all 38 counts. On June 4, 2013, Judge Kurtz sentenced Thomas to 2 life sentences to be served consecutive for the murders. State trial for Eric Boyd on March 20th, 2018, 11 years after the murders. A Knoxville County grand jury returned a 36-count indictment charging Eric Boyd for first-degree felony murder. Boyd finally went to trial on the state charges in August 2019. Co-defendant George Thomas testified as a witness in Boyd's trial. In exchange for his testimony, Thomas was allowed to have his first-degree murder convictions reduced to second-degree murder, his aggravated rape convictions reduced to aggravated assault, and his sentence reduced from life in prison without a possibility of parole to 50 years. On August 13, 2019, a jury found Boyd guilty on nearly all the charges, including everything that we already talked about. I keep on saying the same thing over and over again, but he was then found guilty, which is great news. It took them a long time, but with the testimony, hopefully it's true. I believe it's true, because of course Thomas got something out of it by testifying against Boyd. He was found guilty, and he will spend the rest of his life in prison. Incarceration status for Vanessa Coleman, the only female charged and convicted in the crimes, serving a 35-year sentence. Coleman was eligible for parole in 2017, and her sentence expires on April 18th, 2036. Doesn't seem that far away. In August of 2014, the families of the victims were notified that with good behavior, Coleman's sentence was being reduced by 16 days per month of incarceration, making her eligible for parole consideration in October 2014. The parole hearing was rescheduled from October to December. At the December 2014 2014 hearing, Coleman was denied parole, and her next parole consideration date was set for December 2020. Coleman again went before the parole board on December 8th, 2020. Shannon and Chris's mothers and father gave statements to the board opposing parole. The 7 members of the board voted unanimously to deny parole for Coleman and to ensure that she would not be eligible for parole before a parole board again for 10 years. Thomas is serving a 50-year sentence. Davidson was sentenced to death on October 30th, 2009. Boyd was already being held serving his 18-year sentence, but then he got the additional charges added to. So Boyd really thought that he was going to be getting out in 2022. That would have been his release date, but then he was found guilty on those other charges, and so now he's going to spend the rest of his life in prison. The house, that Chipman Street home, was bought by Waste Connections, a national garbage collection company that had a depot on the next lot. Waste Connections demolished the house in October of 2008. The company's intent was to replace the house with a memorial dedicated to Chris and Channon, and they did just that. A memorial for Chris and Channon was created at the location of where that house once stood. So there was some good that came out of this. There was a foundation set up. The Channon Gale Foundation and the Channon Gale Memorial Golf Tournament was established in Channon's memory to provide a scholarship to attend the University of Tennessee. A foundation has also been established in Chris's name. The foundation holds an annual memorial baseball tournament at the Halls Community Park. A memorial scholarship is given annually in his name to a graduating Halls High School basketball player. Channon's father, Gary, speaks at churches proclaiming how in spring of 2017 he asked God to restore him from his perversive anger, presents compelling testimony on how he is overcoming the anger that most East Tennesseans saw play out during news articles throughout the duration of the trials and appeals. This poor man has been through the ringer. I don't blame him for being angry. You're going to jail. He's not being charged. He's being charged. The judge is on drugs. What the heck? Like, that poor family. I just keep saying that, but anyways. Legislative changes happened. Thanks to lobbying from the families of the victims, 2 new laws were introduced in 2014 as a result of the case. The Chris Act was introduced to eliminate the need for a judge's signature on a jury verdict after the delivery of a unanimous verdict. This thus eliminates the 13-juror rule, which stipulated that the judge must validate a jury's verdict. Had such a law been in place during this case, the retrials would have been avoided. The Shannon Act restricts attorneys and defendants in attempting to portray a victim in a negative light, such as making allegations about their behavior. During the trial, Davidson had alleged that his victims had come to his house to buy drugs, which they believed to be false, that they never did. According to Channon's mother, her family felt great pain as a result of listening to the defense. I believe that. And the defense questioning Channon's character during these multiple trials. Meanwhile, due to laws protecting the accused, the jury was not allowed to be informed of Davidson's previous carjacking convictions. So we can talk about Channon's character, but we can't talk about Davidson's previous crimes. That's not fair. It's not, so that's why they created this law. It's good to hear that something good came out of these 2 deaths of Channon and Chris. This case was dark. Of course, I feel sorry for the victims, but the families, it just makes me sick. My heart goes out to the family. If they ever see this video, which I hope that they do not, I hope that they're moving on with their lives, healing, and as much as physically possible. So if you guys made it this far, oh my gosh, I know this was a tough one. You guys are rock stars, and I love you to death. There are more true crime videos in my Captured Killers playlist if you'd like to check those out. But if not, stay safe, my loves, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye.